All right, so this is the last lecture of the chapter on sugars. And in this lecture, we're going to talk about the types of added sugars and sweeteners. So first of all, I want to make sure that you guys understand the difference between added sugars and low-calorie sweeteners. Now, added sugars are sugars that are added during food processing, exactly what they sound like. Added sugars contain mostly sugar, and they also perform the same functions as sugar. They are calorie dense. So I know that sounds self-explanatory, but I just want to make sure that you know those are different from low-calorie sweeteners. Added sugars include sugar, corn syrup, honey, malt, maple syrup, agave, molasses, concentrated fruit juice. Those are a lot of the common added sugars that you'll see in food products. Low-calorie sweeteners, on the other hand, are compounds that are sweet like sugar, but they do not yield as many calories for one of the following reasons. There are two reasons we're going to talk about that a low-calorie sweetener is low calorie. Number one, it is much sweeter than sugar, so only a small amount is added, and it's such a small amount that it hardly adds any calories at all to the product. And so you might need an entire cup of sugar, but only one little packet of your low-calorie sweetener. And so even if there are some calories in that little packet, there are so much fewer than, an entire cup of sugar that is considered low calorie. Second reason, it is not digested or absorbed efficiently by the body, so the body can't use it for energy. So some examples of low-calorie sweeteners would be stevia. Those are the brand names in the parentheses there. Truvia, Purevia, Sweetleaf. Aspartame would be equal in NutraSweet. Saccharin, that would be your Sweet and Low or your sugar twin. Sucralose, that would be Splenda. Ace-sulfame K would be Sonnet. And then sugar alcohols, these are not brand names here, but these are types of sugar alcohols: mannitol, sorbitol, xylitol. So you don't need to remember the whole list, but I would like you guys to kind of recognize which of these are considered added sugars, so calorie dense, versus which of these are low calorie sweeteners, low in calorie. Okay, so now we're actually going to get into the meat of the lecture, and we're going to start by talking about added sugars. So the first kind of added sugar is the most obvious. It would be your cane sugar. Cane sugar is made from a plant called sugarcane, and they take this plant, they boil it, they purify the results, the solution, they crystallize it, they dry it, and they end up with sucrose. And it can either come in the form of cubes, or it can be, your bag that you use for baking cookies. And yeah, sucrose generally comes from sugarcane. It can also come from sugar beets, and the process to refine it would be pretty much the same as cane sugar. Brown sugar and turbinado. These are just less processed forms of white sugar. Instead of going through the entire refinement process, they're stopping it somewhere in the middle. And remember, we talked about these in our last lecture. They just have a more complex flavor than white sugar. White sugar might be coarse granulated. That's generally just used as a decoration. Fine granulated, that's what you mostly use in baking. Or it might be powdered, which is usually for icings or, frostings, maybe candy, anything that it needs to dissolve really well. So that's your cane sugar right there. The next thing we're going to talk about is corn syrup. Now, corn syrup's a hot topic. That's why we had you watch another video on that one. But we're just going to talk about it really quick here. Corn syrup comes from the starch in corn, and the starch, remember, is a polysaccharide, and so the first thing they do is they just chop those polysaccharides down into monosaccharides, which are your sugars. And that produces corn syrup. And then once you have your corn syrup, you can either just bottle it up and sell it like that, or they might change it to high fructose corn syrup, which just takes some of the sugars and transforms them into another kind of sugar called fructose that is sweeter. And so they do that to increase the sweetness, and it also has some other properties that are a little better. So corn syrup versus table sugar, which is better? Well, it depends on what you're using it for, but corn syrup does have some advantages over table sugar. First off, for food manufacturers, it is very cheap. It also browns better, retains more moisture, and it prevents crystallization in candies. Now, as far as nutrition goes, high fructose corn syrup has been demonized. But if you're talking about the same amount of corn syrup versus table sugar, there's really no difference nutritionally. They both have the same number of calories. They don't really have a whole lot else in there. So, of course, you want to avoid eating too much of either one, but you're not going to have major nutritional issues because you're eating corn syrup instead of table sugar. Just avoid both of them is the bottom line. There are some other types of added sugars. You've got honey, malt, maple syrup, agave, molasses, concentrated fruit juice. Some of them have unique flavors, and so that would be a good reason to use, say, honey or maple syrup over table sugar. Also, molasses it has a much darker flavor, and a dark color too, so it's used in like gingerbread or molasses cookies, and that adds a lot of flavor that you wouldn't get from just table sugar. But some of these different types of sugar are trendy for nutritional benefits. People talk about honey has antioxidants, molasses has minerals. I've also heard that agave is supposed to be healthier, but from a nutritional perspective, none of these are actually nutrient dense. They all have the same number of calories per gram of sugar. And really, you just want to reduce added sugar from any source at all when we're talking about preventing obesity or addressing obesity or other diseases related to it. Sugar is sugar is sugar. It doesn't matter what source you're getting it from. There is no type of added sugar on this list that has enough nutritional benefit from antioxidants, minerals, whatever you want to look at. There is not a nutritional benefit that can outweigh the effects of eating too much sugar. So none of these would be considered healthy. The one little point that could redeem some of these sugars is that some sources of sugar, like agave, taste a little bit sweeter than table sugar, and so less sugar needs to be added to the product. This really isn't a very significant difference, though. So, for me personally, that would not be enough to make me buy agave instead of just table sugar, because agave is very expensive and it's not going to make that much of a difference in your diet. Alright, so we've talked about all of our added sugars. Now we're going to just briefly touch on low-calorie sweeteners. And remember, these are low calorie either because they are not digested or absorbed effectively, or because they're so sweet that only a small amount is added to the product. Now, these can be either natural, like stevia or xylitol, which come from plants, or they can be artificial, like aspartame, saccharin, and sucralose, which are produced by chemical processes. Low-calorie sweeteners do not perform all of the same functions as sugar in baking. And remember we talked about flavor. they're pretty good at imitating the flavor of sugar. Some of them might have like little off flavors or aftertastes, but for the most part, they're pretty good at flavor. But they're not very good at imitating the texture or the color or the shelf life effects of sugar, either because they're not present in big enough amounts. Remember, some of these sweeteners you only have to add a tiny little bit, and so there's not enough of the product in there to really imitate those effects of sugar, or because they have a different chemical structure. So just remember, low-calorie sweeteners cannot replace everything about sugar, even though they do imitate its flavor. And on top of that, not all low-calorie sweeteners have the same properties as one another. For example, some of them are better for cold foods, others can be baked, others are good in like your diet sodas. All low-calorie sweeteners are regulated by the FDA and they're pretty thoroughly tested for safety. So I know a lot of people are concerned about having chemicals in their food, but these have been tested pretty well and they have not been found to cause short or long-term problems. They may result in weight loss, but only if they replace sugar instead of being added to sugar. So think about like if you have a diet soda with your dinner, and then you decide, well, I had a diet soda, so now I have extra calories that I can use towards dessert. That would not result in weight loss. It really needs to replace the sugar in your diet. So I just wanted to reiterate these few little points because it is a hot topic. This is a question a lot of people have um, related to nutrition and sugars and things that can be added in place of sugar. So just reiterating what we talked about earlier, try not to include more than a moderate amount of added sugar in your diet from any source: table sugar, corn syrup, agave, honey, molasses, anything that has calories in it. You should try to reduce that amount in your diet because no matter what antioxidants and micronutrients people say are in those, it's not enough to outweigh the effects of eating too much sugar and eating too many calories. And second point I want to reiterate is low-calorie sweeteners, including artificial ones, have been thoroughly tested for safety, and they may result in moderate weight loss if they replace added sugar in the diet. So that's all we've got on sugars. So great job, guys, and make sure you take your quiz. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to send a message through Blackboard and we'll try to help you out.